Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of One on One. I'm your host, Tyler Small, and today we are joined by yet another notable alum. He's been writing as a sports columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer since 2013, but he's been covering sports since 1996. It's Mike Sielski. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Good to be here.
Great, so let's dive right into it. Before we kind of go into what the theme of all these episodes has been, which is how the current pandemic has affected the sports world and your job specifically, let's kind of dive into what your normal day-to-day would be like if sports were going on.
Well, at this time of the year, if sports were going on, I'd probably be focusing quite a bit on either the Phillies and their, regular routine of games every night. There might be some Sixers-related stuff. We'd probably just be coming out of the NBA draft, and there would be summer league ahead, and trying to talk to whoever they picked in the first or second round. Same sort of thing with the Flyers. Who knows what they would have done in the playoffs and what the repercussions of that would have been. And then, the Eagles would be kind of in a dead point at this time. You might have come off some OTAs and some rookie camp activities in June, in the middle of the month. But at this point, they would kind of be in a dead zone. So at this time of year, it's funny, like right now, I'm not doing much different from what I would be doing if sports were going on. I'd be working ahead on some longer projects, because the day-to-day routine and push isn't as intense in the summertime usually as it is in the fall or the spring or the winter, because there just isn't as much going on day to day.
Right. Okay. So you kind of were somewhat prepared to not hit as head on as maybe other people that just specify into one sport kind of would be.
Well, the hit came early on. I mean, once early March came around, and we were all, everybody was sidelined in whatever they were doing. I was anticipating a very, very busy spring and into summer because the Flyers were playing well, and I was going to be following them throughout the playoffs. The Sixers, as disappointing as they had been, were still going to be a playoff team, and there was the possibility that they may, win around to however long they went. You had the NFL draft. We hadn't held that yet. There would have been more interaction and availability with the players the Eagles had drafted. And of course, the Phillies would have been in full swing. So right now it's not so different, but the months leading into right now have been incredibly different.
Right. Okay. So kind of going off of that now, what have you kind of seen that has been possibly the biggest change? So obviously I think that would be sports, but like maybe something more in your specific world of journalism. What do you kind of see that has been so vastly different that you don't really see it possibly going back to normal whenever sports do return, hopefully by the end of this month?
Well, I think, and it's not going to be a good development as far as my job, or I think, sports fans' relationship with the sport. But I think that teams in all four leagues are going to be very reluctant, with certain exceptions, to go back to giving independent writers and journalists and media members the same measure of access that we had before the pandemic hit. A lot of companies and a lot of industries have discovered that they can do things very much more efficiently or as efficiently by, in situations like this, Zoom calls or doing things remotely. And I think that teams had already been trending, and teams and leagues had already been trending toward trying to control their messaging and narratives as much as they possibly could, without kind of shutting off outside media, independent media, just cold turkey. But this gave them a reason to do that. And so what I fear is going to come out of this is a reluctance on teams' part to say, okay, we'll just come back to Sixers practice on Tuesday and watch the final 10 minutes of practice at our facility in Camden, and then you'll get whatever players and coaches you want to talk to. They may just say, okay, guys, we're going to hold practice on Tuesday and get on your Zoom calls to get your 7 minutes with Brett Brown in a group afterwards, and you don't even have to come to the practice facility. It'll make it much easier for them to shut us out. It'll make it it'll be much more challenging for people in our position to try to find out what's really going on with these teams. And, I know that might sound like not a big deal to certain fans. Like fans are going to think, well, I don't care. I just want to find out what's good with my teams. I can get that from a team's website. I can get it from ESPN, et cetera. But there are so many media outlets now that have financial partnership ties with these franchises that are disincentivized from reporting things that are not complimentary and positive for these teams, that you need places that are going to say, hey, this team is fouling up. Like we have a story, for instance, on Inquirer.com today about an issue related to a former member of the Sixers dance team who felt like she was mistreated by the franchise. The Sixers are not going to tell you that story. They're not going to put it on their own website. It took our beat reporter, Keith Pompey, to find that out and to write about it. So those are the kind of things that could be missed and I fear will be in the future.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Any smart PR is never going to put that kind of stuff out there.
Exactly.
So kind of going off of what you were saying about possibly Zoom interviews for, you said Brett Brown, but some are anticipating possibly with players or anyone in regards to the team. How do you feel about that? Do you think that you're going to get the same kind of stories out of players from a Zoom call that you would if you were in their locker room or face-to-face with them? Do you find any challenges or difficulties with that process?
There's no way that you can get the same quality of stories. No way. No way you can get the same quality of information, build relationships. That's what this job is about, at least the way I have practiced it and tried to practice it. I know that, data analysis, has really come to the forefront in the last decade or two in terms of analyzing sports, and the rise of daily fantasy sports and fantasy sports in general has driven that, the Moneyball revolution in baseball, analytics revolutions in football and basketball and hockey have driven that. But the fact is that not every sports fan looks at sports the same way. And there are still plenty of fans out there who want to know about these athletes. And I want to interact with them as human beings. I would much rather be in a room with you right now than I would doing it this way, because you just get a better sense of who these people are. You can develop relationships. And that's where really good storytelling and that's where great reporting comes from. It's not just, hey, let's hop on a Zoom call and we'll talk about it for a few minutes and then we'll click off the Zoom. Like, you build relationships with people by spending time with them. And if we can't do that, the quality of storytelling and the quality of reporting around, whether it's politics, local government, sports, anything, is just not going to be as good. And people are not going to really know what's going on with their, the institutions that they follow and treasure so much.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Nothing like face-to-face contact.
Right.
So now kind of gearing it towards what we know as of now. And again, I said it earlier, fingers crossed that they still happen, but by the end of the month, we should have an MLB season. We should have the NBA playoffs resuming in Disney. We should have the NHL playoffs. Still haven't decided a location yet, but it's looking good. How in the loop are possibly you, because you're kind of in like the upper echelon of journalism, but all journalists together, like how difficult is it to get that information from those sports leagues, or how delayed is it? Do you kind of hear it from the rest of us, like this, us fans kind of hearing it, or do you get like insider information?
Well, I'm not a beat reporter for any particular team, so no particular team is kind of incentivized to give me the information first in the way it would be for like, Adam Schefter in the NFL or Adrian Wojnarowski in the NBA or Keith Pompey in the Sixers, something like that. So there's that aspect to it too. So in some ways, the way the game is played now with these leagues is they end up leaking some of this information to these, what you could call like super newsbreakers, whether it's Schefter or Woj or, there are certain people affiliated with the NHL or Ken Rosenthal in Major League Baseball, Bob Nightingale from USA Today, who covers baseball. These reporters really get the information first and, kind of disseminate it out to everybody else. So in some ways I find out this stuff just the same way you do. And as I said before, these leagues are not incentivized to be open with us now, especially now, because there's so much, it's so fluid at this point. As you mentioned, it looks like all of these leagues are going to start play, but there's no guarantee that they're going to finish. We don't know what this virus, has in store for us yet. I think teams and leagues are hypersensitive to the possibility of players, executives, coaches, whoever getting infected. The word that doesn't get thrown around very often, but should be, is lawsuits. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of getting sued. That's what this comes down to. And so they're going to take this step by step as carefully, I think, as they can. And they're not going to let us in any meaningful way until they've, in their minds, dotted every I and crossed every T.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to kind of go an extension off of what you just said there, kind of talking about lawsuits. I feel that from this whole, mostly Major League Baseball, from the whole process of it, a lot of the fan base kind of got a 3-month lesson on the inside out of the business world of baseball. And I don't know how much that was supposed to be incentivized. And it's clear that not everyone wanted that as public as it was. So how did you kind of deal with that process? Because there was nothing really else to write about during that point in time. So how was that process to talk about the inside out of the baseball world, business side?
Mind numbing. It was two sides that neither one of which could take a step back and say, is there a greater good here? They were both so dug in, whether it was the owners or the players, in terms of what can we get out of this for us, that neither one of them, was in a position or of a mindset to take a step back and say, okay, what do we have to do to compromise and make this work and not make it doesn't have to be perfect, but let's make it work. To me, it was a metaphor for our society now. Like, we assign these purity tests to institutions and people all the time, and it's ridiculous. Like, you see the same thing in our politics. It's, hey, it's not about can we come together on these few issues where we might disagree on 7 out of 10 things, but on these 3 things, we can be of like mind and we can get something done. No, we are not incentivized to do that anymore. Whether it's because of social media, whether it's, the instantaneous, news cycle, the outrage cycle that has to be filled. You are not rewarded for bending or compromising. You see this in poll after poll when it comes to politics. This one side is entrenched with 35%. This other side is entrenched with 35%. They will never meet. Those ends will never meet. And then in between is the 30% that everybody's fighting for. And I see the same thing in sports. I saw it in this baseball situation. It's like, this is what the players want. This is what the owners want. Neither side wants to give in. And who ends up losing out? It's everybody in between. It was ridiculous to me. And compounded to that is the fact that I grew up a huge baseball fan. It was my favorite sport. I loved it. I could care less whether it comes back now. I think the game has changed so much that it has become boring. It is hard for me to watch a Major League Baseball game nowadays. It is really hard because of the way the game has changed. It is not as colorful. It is not as, there isn't as much variety. They've sacrificed individuality and variety for the sake of the incremental advantage. Everybody's trying to walk or hit a home run, and they're willing to strike out however many times, and every pitcher's trying to throw 95 to 100 and strike out every hitter he faces, and it's dull and it's boring. And so to answer your question, Tyler, like, watching the back and forth, I was kind of like, what do I care? Like, I'll wait for the NBA and the NHL to come back, and I'll wait for the NFL to get here, because even if baseball were to come back, there would be an allure initially, like, hey, we have sports back. But I know within a couple of games, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm watching another 15 pitch at bat, in the 4th inning, and the game's already 2 hours old. And what am I doing here? This isn't enjoyable anymore.
No, I think you speak for a lot of fans and a lot of different demographics right now. I mean, just the entire process was really mind-numbing, like you said, and they really missed out on an opportunity to widen their fan base with no other sports on. But
they had the stage to themselves, and they didn't want to take it. It was amazing to me. Like, could you not see that, like, nothing else is going on? And if you reach a solution, you will have the stage to yourself. And they couldn't even come together on that. Never mind what they've allowed to happen in the game over the last 10 to 15 years, which, as I said, the game is not as vibrant as it once was. Go back and watch a game from 15, 20, 30 years ago. Baseball is a better sport then. There are more different ways to play. There are more different kinds of players. I sound like an old fogey here, but it's true. Like,
No, you're right.
I miss knuckleball pitchers. I miss stolen bases. I miss, complete games where part of the drama of watching a game was like, oh, okay, the starting pitcher's taking a shutout into the ninth inning. I want to see if he finishes it. I don't want to see the new reliever come in just because, well, he's fresher and it'll help the team win the game. Like, there are dramatic elements to sport that baseball seems to have gone out of its way to neutralize over the last 2 decades.
Yeah. No, it really is a shame. I could talk to you about this all day, but before Tanya yells at me, I'm going to get this a little back on track.
I've been there, man. I've been there. She's yelled at me too. Don't take it from her.
I'll try not to.
Okay.
And
I'm just kidding, Tanya.
the way I'll do that is by throw this last question in there for the basis that's going to be watching this is mostly LaSalle students that a lot of them, including myself, want to be in a position like yours one day. What did you kind of find from LaSalle that may have really helped you throughout this current pandemic? We always talk about like everyone's used the opportunities to get them into the sports field in the first place, but with how different the field is now, do you find anything that really prepared you for what seemed unpreparable these past couple of months?
That's a good question. Well, the first thought I have is, I've relied a lot on my friends, the friends that I made at LaSalle, just to get us through like anybody else. I'm sure you've relied on your friends, and I have a core group of people, small group, who I still maintain close contact with, and just being able to FaceTime and have like a, hey, it's Saturday at 7:00, let's all get on Zoom and have a beer and just see what's going on. So there's that aspect of it. To your question about how my time at LaSalle might have prepared me for this in my career, the great thing about LaSalle, and I graduated in 97, it's a long, long time ago, but I think that the principle still holds today. The great thing about it was, if you were an undergrad there and you had some ambition and you had an idea, all you had to do was go to somebody in your department, a faculty member, somebody like that, and say, hey, I want to do this. And they would say, here's how, okay, that's great. Here's how you need to do it. Here's what you need to do. I'll be here to help you out. You guys have Tanya now. She's been there a long time. She's a great example of that. I had people like Bill Wine and Sid McLeod who, would just say, hey, go do it. That's awesome. You had this combination of freedom and guidance that was really, really great. And I think that helps me to this day. I've always felt like I can be a self-starter when it comes to doing my job. I want to make the extra phone call, to do the extra little bit of reporting. I want to try to come up with the angle or the idea for a story that nobody else has thought of, and throw myself into it, for a while, and write it in a way that nobody's written it before, and cover it in a way that nobody's covered it before. And I think that was born out of my years at LaSalle and having that freedom at an early age, in an early stage in my career, and just having people who want to say, go do it, man, go for it. And we're here to help if you need us. And I think that resonates with me to this day.
Great. Yeah, I think that a lot of people in the field now, or students of mine that are there now, could attest to how true that really is, that LaSalle really does give you the tools to go out and do whatever your mind wants to do. It's great.
I agree.
Mike, I really appreciate the time. Thank you for squeezing me into your busy schedule.
No problem, Tyler. I'll make time anytime.
That's great to hear. Hopefully you can get back to your normal line of work soon, covering sports as they're happening. Really hope for you, because
I hope we can all get back to normal soon, in whatever form that takes for each of us.
Hopefully it comes soon, because I'm going to keep saying it. Fingers crossed, because this next month, if all goes according to plan, it should be an excellent time that makes up for those 3 months without anything. So I wish you the best of luck.
I hope you're right, man.
All right. Well, that does it for this edition of One on One. I'm your host, Tyler Small. Thank you for joining us.